Thank you so much for spending time with me today. Here's your episode. Hey everybody, welcome back to Inspire Your Success. As always, appreciate you being here with me today. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can tell it's going to be a special interview that we're doing in person here in Phoenix, Arizona. Today's guest is Tommy Baker. Tommy is an author, podcaster, coach, and overall badass. I love the content that he puts out, and I am very, very confident that it's going to help you with your business and your life. In this podcast episode, we're going to go over finding your passion, your purpose, and really the habits of success. Hopefully you enjoy. All right, Tommy, thanks again for being here, man. Really appreciate it.
Michael, my pleasure, and love what you're doing with this platform and changing so many lives.
Thank you, man. That's the same to you. I mean, it was about a year ago today, actually, that your book came out. I remember going to Scottsdale, meeting you at a book signing real quick. I'd followed you on Instagram. I was like, man, this guy seems like he's really got it together. He's, pumping out content. He's changing lives. And so thank you. You've been definitely an inspiration to me. So.
Well, it means the world. And something you did there that's powerful is you showed up.
Yep.
And if you're out there and you're wanting to get further along, go to the places where the people that are already doing the things that you want to be doing are doing them. Like, super simple, just show up.
100%. And I remember even I was like a little nervous. I was like, I don't know. I'm not that big yet. I'm just figuring this stuff out. Literally, I had all these like random little voices come in, but I just showed up. I was like, hey,
that's the key, man.
He's just a person, right? And so I think that's one of the things that people kind of forget.
And everyone is, right? And so you have to go to those places where it's like you're gonna make connections. You're gonna overcome your resistance a little bit, and that's where the magic happens.
Absolutely. So you talk a lot about that on your Instagram. You got books. You have so much great content out there. I mean, you're constantly in this positive state. I mean, I feel like you're on fire 24/7. Can you take us back and like just fill us in? Was it always like this, or was there something that really sparked this catalyst? Because I don't see too many people with your kind of energy and intention.
Absolutely, man. And no, it's like, it wasn't always this way. I was living a life off purpose. I was waking up not with excitement, with dread. I was going to a place that I didn't want to go and spending 8 hours at. I was lonely in relationship. I mean, there was a period where things just weren't working. But when things aren't working, to me, that just provides clarity. So many people seek clarity on what they want. Well, let's get clarity on what's not working today, because when we can take inventory, then we can create change. That led me down a rabbit hole to answer some tough questions like, who am I? What am I doing here? Why aren't things working? How do we get into a place where we're excited about life? And that led me down the rabbit hole of personal growth and development, hiring my first mentor, Dr. John DeMartini. And I just had this unquenchable thirst to continue learning and being the student. And then ultimately that led to transformation.
Perfect. So what year was this that you really started getting into it? Was it like you went to college and then you started a 9-to-5? Like what age or what time in your life?
Yeah, I had done some stuff in the spiritual side earlier, but really started to get serious. During that transition from college to what's next. I had already spent some good time, consuming personal development, but that's all it was. I was just consuming. It sounded really good, but I didn't know how to put that on paper. I'm going to get a job, and I remember I was heading, in the train into New York City, and for an internship that became an offer in the financial industry. And I remember being on that train, and it was I graduated in 2008. So it was right during the crisis, and I'm on the train, man. And I just felt the energy, everybody there, like their face, their energy. And I was like, this is not I'm on the wrong train, literally and figuratively. And that was an insight that I was doing something that wasn't something that I wanted. It was really what my parents wanted for me, because my brother and sister are also in finance. And I felt very pressured to do that. So I did that. But I had that moment of intuition that said, this is not for me. And right now there's a choice. And we all have these inflection periods in life where we know something has to change. And the question is, do we have the courage to take the choice that we want?
Absolutely. So you said this is 2008, like you said, the financial crisis, very tough time to be in the financial industry. What did you do at that time? Did you try and figure it out, go to a 9-to-5 for a little bit? And, what was kind of the breaking point for you that you're like, man, there's more to life out there. Like, I'm really not doing what I'm aligned to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. That lasted about 6 months, but in the back of my head, I already knew that I was out, that I was going to do something else. And at that time, my passion, really deep passion, was physicality and fitness. To me, it was a spiritual quest. I wanted to answer 2 questions. Who am I when life gets hard, and why am I here? And through physicality, that's how I explored those questions. But that was my passion. So what I wanted to do was open up a facility. And so while I was going to the 9-to-5, I was spending the mornings and the lunch breaks and the night at that point, blogging about fitness and, figuring out what model I was going to go after, and then ultimately put myself in a position to launch.
Nice. So you're at the job, you're doing the side hustle, basically. I know that grind of like trying to go to a job, trying to do your passion as well. Did you have like a sign that you're like, all right, it's time to quit? Or were you trying to make some money on the side and then eventually kind of make that leap to doing fitness full time?
Yeah, I just got that hit of clarity that it was time. Like, because again, I started to see myself going down the train tracks of getting anchored into a position, because I've always believed in a linchpin mentality. If you're gonna do anything, be the best. And even though I hated the financial markets and I hated what I was doing, because I would they would give me a sheet of 300 people to call every single day, and then I would get on conversations and try to sell them the investments with other people, right? But I always believed if you're gonna do anything, be the best. So I would go in there like I'm gonna dominate this, right? And so, but with that came some opportunities, right? And I would see people come and go all the time, because that's a very tough position to be in, especially during the crisis. Everyone's gonna hang up on you, right? But I knew I was gonna get anchored there. Get anchored with a bigger salary, get anchored with another opportunity, get anchored with something. And that's when I made the decision that, I'm going to pursue this. And in a year, I'm going to open up a facility. At that point, I really had no reason to make that declaration besides a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of passion. But again, we have these windows of opportunity, and that was mine, and I stepped into it.
Fantastic. So at this time, were you feeling scared? Were you thinking like, is this going to be a risk? Were people, judging you? Or did you just finally say, hey, this is the day, I'm going to go all in? And did you just open it up?
You definitely feel both, but the enthusiasm and the passion and really this mindset of, okay, like, what is the worst that could happen? Like in a real world scenario, what is the worst that could happen? There are so many opportunities out there. At that point, I was super young. I mean, the world was open to me. So if I went out and if I completely fell on my face, okay, that's that big, like, what does that look like? And I just remember writing that down on paper, and it didn't seem as daunting, right? But the enthusiasm and the passion and the vision were so much more, emotionally charged, that's really what I focused on. But the fear and the resistance, it's always going to be there. Nobody makes bold decisions without that fear. In fact, in the new book, I say fear is your compass to step into it. And if you don't have fear, if you don't have a degree of fear, you're not thinking big enough, or it's not your path.
Love it. That is so powerful. And it's right, because fear, everyone has this like negative connotation to it, right? That it's like, oh, I'm not supposed to do that, or I'm not really sure. But it's like on the other side, it's greatness.
Absolutely.
And people just are so terrified of it. But like you said, what's the worst that can happen?
Fear is the compass. I also study a lot of regret and spoken to some of the people that are, in the country who are focused on regret. Like that's their core specialty. And very rarely do we regret the things that we did. And if we do, it's a short-term regret. The regret that's hollow, the regret that lasts, the regret that takes us to our 70s and our 80s is the things we didn't do. And to me, I just like to leverage that to make bold decisions now, to imagine a future where, what if I stay on this path for 5 years? What if I stay here for 10 more years? What if I stay at the job that I know is not for me, that's really eating away at my spirit and my soul for the next 3 years? What is the opportunity cost of that? And when we really get comfortable or uncomfortable with that, that makes it easier to make a hard decision today.
I agree with that. I think so many people don't think about, they might be miserable now, or they think I'll be okay, but then they don't really think like, what is this going to look like in a year, 5 years, 10 years, and like really play out that scenario. So when you were in this Wall Street, we'll say, kind of job, it was okay.
Yeah.
So when you're in this, were you actually thinking like, God, in 5 years I'm going to be miserable, or 10 years I might be overweight and depressed? Like, were you actually playing these scenarios out, and was that what helped you make that leap?
Absolutely, because the energy on the train, the energy going, in the markets, especially at that time, and I was literally living right next to Wall Street, was this just impending doom. And I also saw my father, who was in the financial industry, give his like life and soul to it, and then get kicked to the curb because he was 65 years old and they had no use for him. So just watching that in real time, someone who woke up at 3:30 every single day, I knew there had to be a better way, and I wanted to make a different choice. And so this specific tactic I just call reverse visualization, which is like, you imagine yourself down the line. Nothing has changed. You're in the same position. You haven't made any decisions. Nothing has transformed. How do you feel in that place? And it's always going to be much worse than it is right now, because what you said is so true. Human adaptation is what got us here. It's why we're in this room right now. It's also the reason why most of us stay stuck. We can, if we start a job that we know is not for us, in those first 2 weeks, the pain and awareness that this is not the right job is super, super high. We're reminded of it every single day. 6 months down the line, it has its perks. We get benefit. I get health benefits, and the economy is slow. 6 years down the line, whoa! Now I've been in this career for a while. I got some awards. You can see where this goes, and if you do that long enough, you get very comfortable with the adaptation of things that you don't want, and then you wake up one day and you realize, wow, I don't want my career. I don't want my physicality. I don't want the relationships in my life, and that's what I want to avoid.
Love it. That's so true. So you're an entrepreneur now. You're on the route. Like, were you full time? Were you like how was it like growing the business first off? And then what do you think some of the kind of scary signals that you got at the time, or were you experiencing fear of just getting clients, like paying the bills? I know there's a lot of people out there that seem to think it's this Instagram lifestyle, right? All we're doing is just having these awesome vacations, being an entrepreneur. You can travel, work whenever. I was quickly found that it's not the case. You're working even harder at the beginning for less money. It's scary. You have bills. You got your business expenses. So can you talk about what that initial time period was? That like what, 2009, 10?
Yes, yes, and absolutely. And it's there's a lot of fear, man. I quickly learned, because I was operating a lot of optimism, enthusiasm, and passion, which is great. I mean, those you need those, but those are just the ticket into the game. I built this facility, and I quickly realized that, if you build it, they will not necessarily come. I had contacts in the industry. I had worked with a lot of people, but on day one, I only had 2 people who committed to starting. And this was in a very expensive part of town. And so you get the fear. But within the fear, again, that discomfort of saying, I don't know how I'm going to pay the lease on this thing the next month and the next month after that, right? That real pain, that real fear, that drives to focus and execution. And so to me at that point, and I know you'll resonate with this, I became obsessed with influential marketing, with copywriting, with what is going to make my facility different than somebody else, because I had no other option, right? People weren't just going to knock on my door because I had expertise and passion and enthusiasm. That's important, but that's not everything. And that's when I really deep dove into, okay, how do we differentiate? How do we communicate to the people that we want to serve in a way that makes us the only option? And that was the lessons of that, are lifetime, because it's obviously stuff that I still use today.
Was that one-on-one? Was it group coaching? And you were in downtown Manhattan? Or
so the first facility actually opened up in Connecticut. And
okay.
And then the second one we did. This one was it started with one-on-one, and it was just very, very all done for you, very high end. I knew the market. It was a very affluent area. They wanted everything taken care of. You're gonna get your workouts. You're gonna get your meal plan. You're gonna get nutrition. You're gonna get a massage, and it's gonna be very high ticket. So that was one model, and then as we grew, we got a lot more numbers. We were able to transition to something more affordable in terms of group training and stuff like that.
Okay, cool. So what time then did you actually transition out of the fitness world and go into kind of your new life, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. Another inflection point. Growing the businesses, having a staff of 12 people. Started to get the whispers that, what am I really deeply interested in? And what I noticed, and like I said earlier on, fitness was just a different type of quest for me. What I noticed was, I was really obsessed with why one person would come into the facility and see incredible results. Another person would come in, and so similar age, demographics, background, very close. And then one person would be completely stuck. And really what I was interested in was what's happening between the years. What is the mindset, the human behavior, the neuroscience, all of these deep models of behavioral change, and that was my obsession. So as time went on and the business grew, I lost interest in the physicality of it, right? And I really wanted to focus on what was going on here, because I knew that was, if we could change that in physicality, we could change that in other areas. And I was also going through the process of learning to be an entrepreneur. All of the issues I was facing had nothing to do with mechanics, strategies, or tactics. They had everything to do with the way that I was thinking about those. And then once I shifted that, then those tactics worked. And so I started to get hints, but I didn't listen. I was stubborn, because also it's very convenient. If something's not working in your life, if you're working for a boss at a job that you don't like, well, it's very easy to say, well, I don't want to do this anymore, right? You're going to get social approval. But when it's something that you've said that you've wanted to do, and that was my dream at the time, and that starts to expire, or doesn't, or you really are looking to enter in a different industry, it's really hard to get honest about that with people, because they're like, dude, this is what you said you wanted. So that was my own process. But I started to get whispers And then finally one New Year's Eve night, which I detail in one of my books, I broke down and I said, and same exact thing. I said, 5 years from today, where am I going to be? And my biggest pain was I was in a industry that I didn't want to be in 5 years from now, and I was in a city that I don't want to be in 5 years from now. And when you combine those two, I had to get really, really honest to create a transformation and radical change.
What year was this then?
That one was New Year's on 2014.
Nice. So you actually started a resolution that was life changing. So was that the time when you came out to Arizona then?
Yes.
Okay.
I knew I needed a shift of environment. I had known that for a while, but I was very anchored. I mean, I had gyms, I had employees, I had leases, I had all of the stuff that would anchor you in a place. I had it.
Talk a little bit more about environment, because that's something that I realized from one of my mentors last year, Benjamin Hardy, and he talks a lot about just setting up an environment for success and just how little things, whether it's not keeping something in your house that you're not supposed to eat or having your office set up a certain way, like talk about maybe like your environment and how that can really change everything.
I love Ben's work, and it's so true, because it's the same thing that I've found to be true. The easiest way to change behavior is to change environment, right? And so for me, I knew, and for some people, New York and the East Coast is the most inspiring place in the world. I knew for me, based on the vision that I had, that wasn't going to be the highest potential for transformation did not lie in that environment. I had to get out. Like I had to get out. And it told me over and over again. And that's why I made the shift. And so when you know you have a vision and a destination you want to go to, your environment is either going to be your anchor for staying stuck, or at best incremental results, or catalyst for exponential results. This happens in physicality and where you live and the people you hang out with, all of that stuff. And so that simple act of changing your environment is going to change, just like Ben talks about, it's going to change your mindset, it's going to change your behaviors, you're going to act differently, et cetera, et cetera. And what I was really craving at that time, I needed space. And I had no space, and I had no space to think, and I didn't have environments that inspired me and fueled me. And that's why I made the transition.
How'd you find Arizona then?
I meditated on it. I know it sounds so...
If you would have asked me 10 years ago, I would have said, yes, that sounds really dumb, but I completely understand my website name. I got meditation. And honestly, I made the move to Arizona myself from San Diego. It was right after college. I had graduated. I had zero ambition, zero clue what I was going to do, but I knew I needed to change my environment. And one morning, I just woke up and said, I have to move to Arizona. Two weeks later, I was there. I mean, I didn't know anyone. I didn't have I had like $1,000 to my name. I had no connections, but I was like, I need space. I need to just, I don't want to live with 5 people in San Diego. I don't want to just keep being a college student that's like too old to be doing those things anymore. That's like, get a life, right?
Yeah.
But I just woke up one day and it was kind of like, intuition, I guess, now looking back and kind of studying the subconscious and the mind. It was like, this is what you're supposed to do. But I think a lot of people don't take those hints or aren't quiet enough to ever hear their intuition. Can you talk about like meditation or just getting quiet? I know you do a lot of journaling and different things. Like, just talk about creating that space so people can actually hear from themselves, because we're bombarded with social media and just noise all the time.
It's such a great distinction, and I love that part of your story too, because there's wisdom inside of us at all times, and there's answers inside of us to the deepest questions that we have. That might be a small problem in business. That might be an existential questioning of what are we here for, right? Just like you said, we won't find the answers in the noise. And obviously for me, this has been really difficult because a part of my identity is doing workouts, doing business, doing masculine energy, right? That's what it's about. But you got to be willing to create the container and the space for those answers to come up. I had somebody on my podcast and he said, the reason why most people don't slow down is because if they slowed down, they wouldn't love everything that they saw. And I think that's beautiful, because within there, just like we said, when you were, living off purpose, and so was I, we had to get really honest in that space to feel what we were feeling about that. Otherwise, we can conveniently ignore it and never make a transition. And so to me, it becomes non-negotiable in my life to create pockets of space where I'm connecting with myself, where I'm actually, you said intuition, for a lot of people, that's a very, they don't even know what that is, because to me, I see it as a Wi-Fi signaling system. And early on, as a man, growing up in a conventional society, conditioned society, it's like, no, you're not going to feel your feelings. So I don't even know what those feelings are. So step number one is, okay, what are we feeling, right? And step number 2 is, okay, what are we going to do with that? And so to me, creating the space turns the signal from like, oh, dial up, because that's what most of us have. We don't really know what we're feeling. For anybody out there, if you've had kind of in a relationship argument, usually, and I know I'm being generic here, but usually the woman, she knows exactly what she's feeling in the moment. I know for me, when I didn't know I have my emotions in check, like 3 days later, I'd be like, that's what I was feeling. That was the level of disconnect, right? So the question is, can we create the container to start to tap into that inner wisdom, the answers that are in there? And yes, we do that through journaling, through meditation. I do a lot of float tanks. And one of the reasons I came out to Arizona, nature for me is a very quick access point for that. And again, I know we're talking about big problems here, but for you out there, it's like, think about a time where you had a problem in your business or in your life and you went to go hit a workout, or you went for a walk with someone, or you spent some time in solitude and you had the answer come really, really quickly. The question is, were you deep looking for that answer, or did you just create the space for that answer to come to life?
Most people just aren't ever, quiet enough to get that. They're always trying to do something to get a result. But like you said, everything's inside you.
Yes.
And you just have to tap into that and turn off your phone, get quiet, and learn. So when you got out to Arizona, you're transitioning from the fitness world. You don't want to do that anymore. What did you find once you got out here to really make the transition into what you're doing now?
Absolutely. Well, the good news is, and this is what I encourage everyone to do, is that I had some real world valuable skills at that point. Skills in writing and communication and copywriting, and I had managed a team and all of that stuff. And so I had a really nice skill set. So I always tell people, even if you're in a position where things aren't working and you don't like it, going back to the finance job, honestly, I hated getting on the phone and making 300 calls a day. But I did it because I knew that those skills, I knew that having a conversation with a 75-year-old who's probably just lost 30% of his, his assets, and me, I was like 22, I knew that just that dynamic of learning how to manage that was a skill that's going to, help me later on in communication, et cetera, et cetera. So I had a bucket of skills, and then I said, who do I really want to serve, and who are the people that I want to connect with? Who was in my position before that needs my help? And, during that transition, I had helped gym owners, really grow their business and with their own mindset, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd already done a good amount of consulting and quote unquote coaching in terms of, helping gym owners and business owners in their own lives and businesses. So the transition was much more fluid. Now, that doesn't mean that it wasn't difficult, right? And I ended up selling the business, and, guys from New York, hedge fund guys, that completely destroyed me in negotiations. So I had very little of anything, and was basically starting from scratch professionally, starting from scratch personally, just like you. Didn't know anyone in Arizona. But to me, that was exciting. And was there fear there? Yes, but just like the other example, there was also a lot of enthusiasm because I was making the choice that felt right to me. Lisa Nichols told me this when I was interviewing her for the book. She's like, Tommy, when it's your choice, when you're betting on yourself and you're going all in on yourself, you feel the fear and you do it anyway because there is no loss in going for it. And that's exactly what happened.
Burn the boats. I mean, that's exactly, you gave yourself no other options. It's not like you were going to move back or try that, so you had to make it work.
Exactly.
So when you're doing this, I think a lot of people are like, well, that's cool, but I haven't really found what I'm trying to do yet. And I've been working with a few different coaches the last few years, and it's just inevitable now that I've realized that if you really want to be successful financially and in all parts of your life, you really have to do what you're passionate about. Like you're just not going to really be aligned and be purposeful. And you talk a lot about that too, with like the power of intention and how people can find their passion and purpose. So can you talk about how you found yours, or how other people can find theirs if they're in a 9-to-5 and they're just going through the motions like, oh, it's a paycheck and I get those benefits. How can they actually transition out and really learn what they're supposed to be doing with their life?
Absolutely. And I mean this with so much respect, but if you're in that position, you're being completely lazy and you're using that as an excuse. And I mean that with compassion and respect, because if you don't know what lights you up, that's on you. Now, I'm not saying that you have to have like exact clarity on the blueprint and the system and exactly how you're going to deliver everything. No. What are you curious about today? So let's take inventory, take a step back. Even if you find like you don't have a lot of hobbies, you just go to work, you come back, et cetera, take a step back. Where are you spending your time? So money is not the highest resource. It's time and energy. Where are you spending your time? Where are you spending your energy? What are the things that nobody has to motivate you to do? Nobody has to remind you, hey, Michael, hey, remember you got your podcast today. You're late. You got to get your podcast, right? What are those things? And make a list. Make a list of them. And they're right there. And if you're in a position where you look at that list and it still doesn't light you up, all I say is like, now is your time to get out there, show up, like go to places that have some type of curiosity. Your purpose, your curiosity will leave crumb trails for your purpose and your passion, right? That's number one. And number two, it's also understanding that purpose and passion, all of these things, it's an evolution based on your growth. I call it vehicles of delivery. My vehicle of delivery for my purpose early on was the fitness industry. And it was great because I was able to speak, coach, get into people's hearts and minds, all the stuff that I'm doing now. But the vehicle of delivery expired and I had to make a transition. So also understand that it's an evolution. You don't need to have your entire life purpose mapped out in 90 minutes. I've done that at seminars and I looked around, I'm like, what the hell am I doing right now? Should I just write something? And I would write something that sounded like a Hallmark card, right? Because it wasn't mine. I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. My purpose at that time was just to like take the next step. So there's kind of this dichotomy with it, but if you're out there and you don't know, then put all of your energy into the things that are already lighting you up, even if it's just a little bit, and go deep enough to know. Because you might go deep into something, maybe let's just say podcasts, you go deep into a podcast, you know what, this isn't for me. Awesome. You got clarity now instead of thinking like, what if, maybe, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I would advise people.
Instead of just thinking about it, go do it.
Do something. You're not going to find your purpose on the couch. You won't find it on season 7 of Breaking Bad. I don't know if Breaking Bad has 7 seasons. That's just an example.
I think 6, maybe 7. It got pretty good. But no, I'm the same way. I mean, I was in 2015, I was just miserable, but I was still at a job. I was making the money, like living the life everyone told me I was supposed to do. But I was just like, what? There's got to be more. So I just started doing things. Like I joined an acting class in Phoenix. I bought a digital camera to start trying to be, a photographer. Like I just started doing things, and I got laughed at acting class, but it made a good memory. Realized, okay, well, that's not for me. But I chased that breadcrumb trail, like you're talking about, right?
And that's incredible that you did that, right? Because also when I was in that state. And like I've been in the state that you just asked me, I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know what I'm doing. So when I did that, I noticed, going back to the noise, that in that state because I did a time and energy inventory. Dude, I was spending 10 hours a week on fantasy football. I was spending 20 hours a week watching mindless entertainment, right? So we all have the time and energy, but I noticed for me, it was all getting sucked up in distraction, right? So actually, I can be quite radical. So I just cut out all the distraction. Like I literally threw away my TV. We were moving and I decided, you know what, that's not for me. So that thing is consuming my energy. What else can I do? And creating that space allowed me to do the things that you're doing. Well, I got no TV now. I got nothing to distract myself. Okay, let me go to an improv class. Let me go to, an NLP class. I don't even know what NLP is, but it sounds awesome. And that started to really open up the doors. So I love that you said that, because when we put ourselves out there, that's when we really learn about ourselves.
I wish more people would try and do NLP. Just give it a shot. They could learn a lot about themselves.
Absolutely.
So that's so we're into what, 2012, or this is 2014, 2015. So how did you get into all these awesome books that you've been publishing and really start to kind of find in on the author and the coach that you are now?
Yeah, I love it, man. Well, writing has always been a deep passion of mine. So even when I was, I had my gyms, I would write nearly every day. And so that's one of my favorite ways of communicating. And, the first book was, 10 years in the making. It was just about, and I came up with the idea at the gym because people would come in and say, hey, January is right around the corner. We got to get in the best shape of our lives. And I didn't want to be the gym like every other one that, would have the status quo of everyone's excited in January and then by March it's gone. So the first one was about the resolution mindset and dropping that. But in terms of creating those, it was really just doing more of the things that I had already identified were valuable to me. And so it's not just enough to find something that you're passionate about. Number two, it's like you got to work on your craft. And work on your craft is like being willing to look dumb and bad and be really bad at the craft for a while until you actually get to a place where you're halfway decent. And that has been my writing experience. Being able to, launch 2 books self-published, and then this last one is going to be traditionally published.
That's so cool. Congrats on that. We'll talk about that more in just a minute too.
Appreciate it, dude.
Definitely want to learn more.
Yeah.
So I know that you have all this stuff that you're doing all the time. You got the podcast, you're writing these books, you're helping people. it seems like structure is a huge thing to you. Discipline equals freedom. Jocko Willing talks about it. A lot of people talk about the importance of discipline. And I know you have a Sunday ritual that sets you up for success. What do you do every Sunday to really set your week up to do so much? Because I know, like you said, some people are just going to a job. Maybe they go to the gym, but then they sit on the couch 5-6 hours. They're not trying to improve themselves, but it really just comes down to creating a schedule, right? And having some sort of discipline to keep it up. So can you talk about yours? Because I think it's really powerful.
Means the world. Yeah. And just for context, I came from, I consider myself extremely undisciplined, unorganized, never used a calendar, was always late. I was in that world until I chose to make a new decision, because I started to see with my, obsessive quest to study the world's greats and the people who are making impact, like their level of discipline and organization. I was like, how the hell am I going to do that? Right. And so that was a process. But now it's a complete, massive pillar of my life. And so the Sunday one, for example, is really just taking that time on Sunday to say, okay, because how often do we check in, Michael? Like we do this maybe once a year. Like there's like the average person, let's just once a year, if that, right before New Year's, you just check in with yourself. Where am I? And I'm like, that's not enough. That's not enough, right? So the Sunday, I call it the Sunday reflection. And it's anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. And it's a moment to create a bookmark on this week, because we know how fast time flies. And if we don't take a bookmark on this week, we could be 6 months, 6 years, 6 decades down the line and be in a place that we don't want to be in. So that's just a moment to say, where did you win this week? On Sunday, where did you kick ass and take names? It's not time to be humble. Like, where did you actually step into your power? People say to me, well, I had a horrible week. And I said, well, look closely enough, because if you're willing to look closely enough, you'll see the one. That's number 2. Where did you experience a challenge, right? And what is the lesson that you learned? To me, a challenge is as valuable as a win if you get a lesson from it, right? And then I have a whole thing where I set out my priorities, et cetera, et cetera. What I'm trying to say is simple. To the degree that you can take time to reflect on where you are, how far you have come, because you have come. Everybody listening to this has come far. The fact that you're listening to this podcast tells me enough to know that that's true, but also setting the commitments for the upcoming week. And to me, going back to discipline and freedom, all of that stuff, freedom is when all of my priorities, the things that I'm really value in my life, my health, my relationship, my business, serving my clients, serving the readers of the book, serving the people on the podcast, when all of those are inserted into my schedule on Sunday, I got no extra space for distraction. I got no extra space for lazing around. I got no extra space for the idle time that kind of consumes us and becomes anxiety and stress and all of that stuff. It's just there's no bandwidth left. And that's what I want to tell people. And that doesn't mean I'm working all day, because I schedule my white space. I schedule, I float. I'm going to float later. I schedule all of that stuff in for that recharge time. And that's the power of high degrees of structure and discipline lead to high degree of freedom and peace of mind.
What are some of those daily rituals that you do in the morning or at night to bookmark and kind of bookend the day?
Absolutely. Non-negotiable morning routine, which I know you guys have heard so much about. I use one. It's just my own. It's called Daily 6. And, I learn from so many different types of people, but it's what fuels me, right? So that's morning non-negotiable me time. I embed writing into that, because writing is a craft that I want to be world class at, and I'm really far from world class. So it's something I have to work on.
You're better than you think.
I'm getting there slowly. So that's my morning, set me up for success.
What are what time are you waking up? What are you first thinking about? Because I think so many people even struggle with this, and they wake up late or they hit the snooze and they're looking at their phone, and then it's just chasing their tail the rest of the day, right? Like what exactly do you do? Because I want to give someone like tangible steps,
Totally.
not that they have to take years, but just to get an idea of like, oh, this is how I can make it easier or actually stick with it.
So for years in the past, like way long ago, I used to say I'm not a morning person. The problem is when you open up a gym, you're going to have people that want to train at 4:30, 5:30, and 6 in the morning. So that story had to change really quickly for me. And I realized that's all it was, just a story. Because now, and I wake up without an alarm clock, I wake up at 4:30 on average every day. Sometimes it's 3:30 and sometimes it's 6, but somewhere within that 4:30 average. Train myself not to wake up with an alarm clock. And then I create that space. Then it's for me, it's the first thing to do is journaling and then meditation, right? And then I do a couple other things. And then the last thing is physicality and then stepping into my writing. But that morning time, even so, if you're just starting out, so you got to keep it simple, because if you try to wake up at 4:30 and right now you're waking up at 7:30, read any book on habitual change, it's just not going to happen. And this is the problem that we get into, right? So I always encourage people, and it's to just start really simple, 30 minutes a day. And for me, my rules, I have rules associated with that. The phone isn't going to go, nobody can reach me between the hours of the prior night of 8 p.m. and the next morning at 8 a.m. Unreachable. So, and people would say, when I had my gym, I would do this, and my employees would say, well, it's like time. What happens if, and I said, you can figure it out. Like, you figure it out, right? And so we have this, a lot of people have this, feel like they always have to be on, and that for me doesn't work, because it actually, it makes me feel stressed, scattered, and not creative, right? So just protecting that you time in the morning. And for me, it's that morning routine, airplane mode, my most important work of the day. And then that's when I start shifting into other activities.
I always tell people, if you're trying to wake up at, like you said, make that 7:30 to 4:30, you might make it a few days, but you're going to fail, right?
Exactly.
I always say go 15 minutes a week earlier and just work your way up till that 4:30 or 5 or whenever you want to do it. But at the end of the day, people have the time. They don't wake up early enough a lot of times, and they just don't have, I guess, as much focus on that. It's like, look, everyone, whether you're a bum or a billionaire, you still got the same 24 hours. You gotta wake up. So I'm glad I'm not the only crazy person at 4:30, because that's usually when I wake up. People look at me like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm only getting one life, I think. I want to make sure I make the most of it, right?
Yeah, and the average American worker is productive 2.1 hours a day. So, and I honestly think that's generous, because they probably do these surveys.
I don't think I was even that much.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. So to me, and for entrepreneurs, it's even harder, because you don't have a boss saying, hey, you have to do this. You have no accountability except your own, for most people, unless you have a coach or a program. So, and quickly when you step into entrepreneurship, you realize you're not that good at being your own boss, right? Because you got free time. Well, that means anything's available. But that morning time is that structure. If you start for me, I know I can do my most important work and win the day by 12, literally win the day by 12. And if I wanted to, that could be my day. Now, it rarely is, but if I wanted to, that could be my day, because of the level of focus. That gives me the freedom. What do most people do? They're scattered, phone, going crazy, putting out fires, et cetera, all day, doing all the busy work. Then they're on date night that night, and they don't have freedom. They don't have peace of mind. Why? Because they didn't do the most important work of the day. So they're in a conversation, they're in a podcast, they're on a date night, they're doing something, and they're really not there fully. So that's the power of like structure and routine leading to that peace of mind and freedom, which is really what we're all chasing for. We want to feel like we're making progress in our lives. We want to feel like our lives have meaning, and we want to feel that peace and freedom.
Progress equals happiness. Absolutely.
Spot on.
So tell us about this new book you got coming out.
Yeah, I love it, man. It's called The Leap of Your Life. And it's around, I believe that we have hits of clarity, some of the stuff that we've spoken of. We get an idea, we get a breakthrough, something that has to change in our lives. And if we miss the window of opportunity, we could miss out on something that we have no idea what it could be. Right. And so I want to give people permission back, for somebody out there who knows that they're meant for something more, that meant for something deeper, to help give you permission to step into that. But not only make that bold decision, because I know that's step number one. You make the bold decision, then you got to deal with what happens after. And you got to navigate some of the emotional challenges and some of the obstacles in the way. And so the book was, from my own life experience, and then interviewing so many people on the podcast like you, we go so deep. And I don't know, I get these people who have accomplished amazing things, and I go back to parts of their story where they made a bold decision in the face of fear. And so I use a lot of those principles in the book to help people make that decision, then navigate it to their success.
That's awesome. I mean, this is what, 2 books in a year?
Yeah. It wasn't planned that quickly. I had this message, but I got an opportunity to work with a publisher, and I had this message deep within me, and then I really, really felt compelled to share it with people.
Is it out yet, or when is it getting released?
April 2nd. So depending on when this is out. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'll make sure to link to it. I'm sure there's a pre-order on Amazon there.
That would be awesome.
Cool. Awesome. Well, before I ask my last question, where can people learn more about you?
Yeah, best place is resistaverageacademy.com. And of course, if you're listening to this, podcasts are your thing. So we have the Resist Average Academy podcast on iTunes and all the other places.
A lot of great guests you've had on there too. So I will make sure to link to everything in the show notes.
Appreciate it.
Cool. So for my last question, what does success mean to you?
It's a great question because it's the first question I ask on the Academy. So I have the simplest definition because it's taken me so long to go from over complex definition to the simplest. And success to me means waking up excited for our lives, because I've been on the other side where I woke up with dread, or my first thought was, hey, it's Monday, this is going to suck, right? And to me, my definition, after all of the soul searching, all of the inner work, all of the traveling thousands of miles to meet with mentors, et cetera, that's my definition. Am I excited about life today? And that doesn't mean it's always perfect. Can I be excited about the challenges? Can I be excited about the adversity? Because ultimately they all lead to the same place, growth.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much again for being on the show. Really appreciate it, man.
Love it, brother.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
All right, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed that episode. I know I did. Tommy brings a lot of energy and enthusiasm. So I want you to go back and make sure to re-listen to this, because there's going to be a couple things that I really think will help you 10x your life, your business. And a couple of them are morning rituals. Like he talked about it again, just having some sort of routine to start the day. If you want some help with that, again, I've created the Win the Morning course, and I'll link to that down in the show notes. And then also he talks a ton about really just finding that clarity and creating space. So if you're in a place where you're not really sure what you should be doing with your life, or aren't really happy with the purpose that you're going, make sure to take some time for you. Turn your phone off, go out in nature, write in a journal, do something for you, because all the answers and everything that you need is inside of you. So thanks again for watching, and as always, I hope you have an epic day. Thanks for listening to Inspire Your Success podcast with Michael Leonard. If you like this show and want to learn more, check out inspireyoursuccess.com/podcast. Also, please leave us a review on iTunes to let us know how we're doing. Join us next week for more tips and tools to help you create the life you deserve.